Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivier Fontenay. I am working at the CNC, and I am the head of the digital creation department, and we're going to talk about digital creation, artistic creation, with the various stakeholders of the sector to focus on public funding. So we have three speakers that play different roles. Chloé Jarry, she's a producer and in charge of PXN, one of the main stakeholders in the immersive artistic production. And she's going to explain the work that she's doing in terms of distribution. Stéfane Perraud is an artist. It was necessary to have an artist in this roundtable. He's creating digital artworks, and we'll see later on what kind of subject he likes and what kind of work he does. And Sarah is a producer of hybrid artworks with different sources of inspiration, and it will be very interesting to see how everything gets organized. Digital artistic creation is a sector on its own. It was recognized about 20 years ago, but its roots date from much longer. We had artists that were scrambling about and creating both technologies and artworks. This pioneering spirit is still very much present in the sector because we are very much still focusing on artistic creation, but without really departing from innovation, from mastering a certain number of tools, still scrambling today as well, actually, but we see that it is an ever-evolving sector that make creation more complicated and yet fascinating. So one could have thought that the public sector would have been completely paralyzed faced with this sector, but it's not the case. For about 20 years now, the public sector has been able to support digital creators and artists. There are different one-stop shops, different stakeholders, and I represent one of them with the CNC. So it's interesting to see whether the intervention of the public sector are appropriate. Is there a way to consider things differently, to do things differently? And is the public sector providing the right answer? So I'm going to give the floor to Stéfane because he's the first link in the creation process. So if you could say a few words about yourself, what kind of work you do, etc. Good afternoon. Very pleased to be here. As Olivier mentioned, I am an artist. I am rather unique because I only work on hybrid projects, and I've been doing so ever since the beginning of my career. I started between living art and visual art. I've been producing some shows, and now I do mainly installations. And for 3 years now, I've been working on an artwork that is tackling a topic that I particularly like, issues related to nuclear energy, which is why I started working on the green glasses. And this project is more about perspective, taking us to futures that are impossible to imagine. With this unimaginable world, I've worked with one of my collaborators, Haram Kebabjan, a writer, and together we decided to tackle this issue through the point of view of a peep show. And this was a way for us to tackle this highly sensitive and political topic, especially because at the time we were working with a complex body that works on nuclear waste management, and we didn't want to give them the upper hand. We wanted to remain independent and to keep our freedom of expression so that we were able to express ourselves and say what we wanted to say on this topic regarding nuclear waste and the way that waste is buried under the ground. So we worked on the Blue Archive project. We have one last episode that we're currently editing at the moment with Picta Novo. And they are allowing us to continue this nuclear adventure that I started working on 10 years ago. Haram joined the team 5 years ago. What's great when you're working with a writer is that you do a lot of research, very intense research on, again, a very political issue, but one that is also deeply rooted within society. We don't really understand how this topic is ever present in our discussions in food, in the chemical sector. And we're going to continue this adventure via some performances. Next fall, we're going to be working with the Aubervilliers Lab. So I'm going back to living art. We are going to set up a performance where we're going to narrate these archives in a different way, in a more humoristic way. And every time we work on a creation with Haram or just myself, every time we work on a new topic, we try to work on new media, which make us so special, I guess, in a way, because we always use new formats, and I turn myself into a technician whenever it is necessary. I learn new techniques whenever I need them, which makes my work even more complicated because our production methods keep evolving with time. And people have a different approach to my work because we don't really know how to take it, how to interpret it. So could you explain why you chose virtual reality for this particular media? Well, what's important is that with in the nuclear issue, I started working on the following question: how can you work with a matter that is impossible to handle? You cannot touch nuclear matter. And in the nuclear sector, people are trying to understand how to make a nuclear bomb explode, how you can create a whole industrial sector based on nuclear energy. So right from the beginning, there's this idea of industrialization with nuclear energy. So yes, now many stakeholders are in the nuclear industrial sector are trying to manipulate matter that is not supposed to be manipulated. We can see men manipulating complex materials, and these operations need to be simulated. And what is better than virtual reality to simulate these handling operations? So I've used virtual reality to in my work. In our project, we never show any image related to the nuclear sector. We only show images of forest in 3D that have been taken from video games, but are super realistic, and that we transform to recreate this romantic world. The idea is to present this unreachable future that is impossible to envisage. One can even wonder how the nuclear sector could even consider to envisage such a future. Thank you. Sarah, you work with artists on artworks that are immersive, but that haven't really chosen virtual reality, but other media. So could you introduce your work and the choice of the various formats? Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having invited me. I'm very pleased to be here today. I created my company Tiki Boom 4 years ago because I met with a stage director, and she was telling me, "Oh yeah, I want to work on this immersive installation that combines dance, theater, and cinema." I did dance when I was young. I've studied cinema. I come from a family of artists and musicians. So when someone tells me about this project, I'm all for it. And she never mentioned virtual reality, but she talked about putting the audience in a situation where we can immerse the public, in the context of the artwork. And 4 years later, in 10 days, we will finally be able to present this artwork. And again, it's a very open approach, a very people-centered approach. The idea is to have people dancing, to place them at the center of the artwork. And everything I do is connected to this idea of having the audience involved. It's not so much about the technology, but it's about trying to connect with the audience and make sure that they are sensorily involved, emotionally involved, and that they are part of a narrative. That's it. That's what I do. Well, that's very impressive. And I believe that you also work on a different project at the moment. Yes. Which takes us back to the question of movement. Where do we meet the audience? This is a virtual reality project, this one, because it was necessary to use virtual reality to tell this story. And I met with the director, and she told me about a project on architecture and feminism. I was already in, and the idea is to have a user on an electric staircase and to progress within the story thanks to the movement of the audience. So we have a strong female character, and she decided that she no longer wanted to go down the stairs, but to go up the stairs. And as you go up the stairs, you meet with a group of women. The idea is really a story of empowerment, trying to see how one can feel involved, physically involved, and in a sensory manner to be fully immersed in a narrative. You talked about dancing and your artwork that will be presented at the Porte de Chaillot. What about the other project? How is it going to be presented? Well, here the format required a different strategy. We are, for this second project, very much related to contemporary art, to installations, which means that it had to be presented in a museum, in a cultural institution, and it could be bought as an artwork. It's not necessarily something that can only be watched in 5 minutes with a virtual reality headset, but I mean, sure, one can do that, but the idea is to get on that staircase and to do something out of it. Hence why we wanted to present it in a cultural institution. I had to meet with some stakeholders working in the living arts sector for the first project. Now I'm confronted with a different sector, the art market, and they're not really expecting us on the type of production that we're doing. So here again, you need to be innovative in the way that you think about the dissemination of the work. And this is a perfect segue to Chloé. Chloé, you are a producer with a long experience. You've had many artworks that have been disseminated. Perhaps you could explain to us how it works, and you can perhaps bounce back on what Sarah just said. How can we envisage the dissemination of these new artistic artworks? Wow, okay, I'll try to answer all these questions. First of all, thank you very much, and hello. Thank you so much for listening to us. Hopefully, we'll give you some food for thought. My name is Chloé Jarry. I am the producer, and we are producing immersive experiences. I work for Lucid Reality and Unframed. We have two companies, and PXN as well, as Olivier mentioned. So I'll try to explain what experiences we've been confronted with. We started doing immersive works through a narrative that wasn't particularly an artistic narrative at the beginning, at first. The first project that I produced in virtual reality was the project of a journalist. We started about 10 years ago. And it just so happens that this journalist wanted to use virtual reality because it had a real impact on the narrative and on the audience. And in the end, we designed an installation together. This was a very long time ago for me. It was about 10 years ago. And I've been working ever since with museums. But to me, installations was very much related to contemporary art, which was really far from what we were trying to do with this journalist. We were not really working on an contemporary art or not a contemporary art installation. What we were trying to do was reaching an audience, a large audience, because it was a multi-user experience that required space. And we ended up disseminating our work in a museum because we needed 600 square meters, and that's not an easy place to find. So we changed the order of things somehow, because we first tried to talk to people that knew about installations. We went to see the Palais de Tokyo, for example, and of course they were very much interested by the innovative aspect of our immersive experience, a multi-user experience with virtual reality. But what they were telling us is that, look, what you're doing is not contemporary art. So we can't just show everything here. And so in the end, we were hosted by the Institut du Monde Arabe. And I believe that it was very appropriate. This was perfect for this specific project. It worked out perfectly. But the way that we thought about disseminating this artwork in museums was very much related to two things. First, the need for space, and two, the need for mediation. Whenever you have an immersive experience, regardless of the technology that you're using, you still have artworks that are positioned within space. And I know that all creators want to experiment with space. It doesn't have to be 600 square meters, but it's still an experience that is related to volume. You need some floor space. Sometimes you need specific height. Mediation is very important as well, so that people can really embrace this immersive experience, and they need to be supported via onboarding, we all know the terminology, and so museums, but now also places of living art. Sarah worked with the Théâtre de Chaillot, for example. All these institutions have become very much interested in these immersive artworks and projects. And then we realized that contemporary art also wanted to, or contemporary artists also were interested in using virtual reality. So you have Stéfane, for example, doing it, but there are many others as well, using it as a tool. And so we realized that two worlds that were quite different at first could confront one another and meet in spaces that were originally very different, because when it comes to audiovisual, it was limited to TV or to the cinema. But here we were having new places, new venues that were open to both the work of artists, contemporary artists, and to artworks that were more to do with documentaries that have more of a visual background, but that will still use the same technologies. I don't know whether that answers your question, but, well, again, I think it raises many more questions, in fact. We won't be able to tackle them all, but it's quite interesting to see how these two worlds are colliding without particularly any hostility, but the idea is to learn from one another, to discover one another, to have on the one hand the world of artists, contemporary art, and on the other the audiovisual sector that are both meeting in museums and cultural institutions. So I'd like to come back to creation itself. Stéfane, as an artist, what kind of support do you have access to? How does it work? Does it work well? Is it really not adapted to what you do? Tell us about it. Well, I started right after school working with the CNC. I got support from the public sector right from the beginning after I started after I graduated from school. Now, of course, as artists, can you perhaps give us more information? How did you get these financial grants? What are you presenting? How does it work? Well, just like every time, just like with time and the evolution of a career, things change. I started in the living art sector. I was creating shows, and so I was asking for financial grants. I was presenting myself as a choreographer, I think I was, or as an artist working in living arts, trying to use digital tools to create choreographies, and the DICREAM was there to support me, and it was really well suited. It was a perfect support for me. I truly benefited from it. It was one of the only grants that could help us at the time and support us in terms of digital artists. There weren't that many programs that were dedicated to digital art. There was the scam, I remember. But again, you know, when you're 25, anything you can get is great. Then, of course, it gets more complicated because you have bigger projects with bigger teams. When you're 25, many people can live on very little, and very often you understand that you need to be well paid. and you need to also pay people quite well so that everyone can work well. And the more you work with people, the bigger projects you have, you understand that you need a lot of money. So you're no longer 25. I think that's not a secret to anyone. So how does it work now these days? Do you still get support? Well, for a very long time, I was present in galleries, so my production method was very different. I was producing for the art market. But for the past 4 to 5 years, I decided to turn away from this production method. And I'm now trying to really broaden my range of work and production. I'm turning to new types of production. Very recently, the CNC provided financial support for us to transform our Zone Bleu project. We also received a new grant, which was quite extraordinary. The post-COVID grant that was provided by the state. So again, I've been very much supported by the government right from the beginning. Even during my studies, I was at the decorative art school. So I get very few private financial support. Sometimes we do co-productions with some institutions. At the moment, for example, we are working on a project, ISEA. It is an installation where we get to listen to satellites in space. We have our own antennas, and the Lausanne Museum is providing some funds. So it is a co-production at the international level between France and Switzerland. And every time museums are inviting us, then they partly fund the exhibitions and the production of the artworks that will then be exhibited. It was the case for the Lausanne Museum, Lieu Unique as well. But most of the funds we get come from public institutions. So you say that you get the support of the state. Is the state presented then as Big Brother, or how does it work? Could you say very clearly how it works? So these grants that you get, do they come with any kind of control when it comes to the content? Do you feel free and independent when it comes to your creation process? I think it's important to know for those that haven't benefited from these grants.
I'm lucky to work with an American, and there was actually he actually got a lot of support. But you have to imagine that in the U.S., you need to organize dinners to raise funds, and in France, we are very lucky to have a lot of financial support. There's a wide range of different types of financial support. And since I work with these national schools, I learned how to work on these files, and I knew exactly what to do. And I'm really seizing this opportunity and benefiting from this wonderful system that we have now. Otherwise, I really don't know how I would manage. Now, the different entities, do they have anything to say on your work, or do you have any people who correct your documents? Are you really free? Well, yes, I'm rather free. I feel quite free even when talking about nuclear waste. You know, there's no way to control. Well, if you have someone on your back, then it's not interesting anymore. And if that happened, if I didn't have my independence, I would stop working. So, quick summary. We're not here to present all the different types of financial support that exist, but you have to remember that there are different solutions, different grants, one of them being the fund to support immersive creation, and that term must be seen widely, and all the digital data with an audiovisual component are eligible. And so an artwork needs to have an audiovisual component to benefit from this CNC grant. There are other types of financial support with the Ministry of Culture, for instance, on the design phases. Now, after the design phase, you move away from the artist's work and you are more into post-production work. Now, Sarah, one day there was a stage director who had this crazy idea to ask you to work on something with dance. So you loved the idea, but how did you go from the idea to the concrete thing, and where did you get the funds? What doors can you knock on? Well, the dance project is a good example. It's something I did that I will not do again. I followed the advice of different directors, but it's always better to wait until you actually have the money before you start producing anything. And that's what I did. Now, of course, I don't have 25,000 euros sitting under my mattress, but I don't do this anymore. And if I go back to the question that was asked to Stéfane, currently with a young company, a very independent and very small company, I cannot actually make do without public funds. Now, the positive point is that in France, the CNC and some local authorities are the only institutions that are really taking a risk from the outset in a project, because the amounts are rather, the amounts that they grant are quite good to do something. But I could not do my work. I could not help other artists either without these grants. So these institutions are really the first ones to invest in our projects. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't really talked to private investors yet. So the negative point is that I rely a lot on these grants. I'm highly dependent upon this financial support, and I know how to get public funds. But then once you get these funds, what do you do with that? It's great to have the support, but it's important to be able to have a balanced budget. But other than that, we have public institutions that are really listening to us. And when we started our dance project, well, same thing. It's something I won't do anymore, but we helped authors get these grants. We didn't get them for them, but we simply helped them, guided them. And there are many things that can help. And we also turn to CNC, the CNC and the regions. And now I have a project in Rennes for which I got money from Rennes Métropole, but it's a call for project. You have to file an application. It's the same process as asking money to the CNC. So same process. These people are going to help us first. And I don't know why, but probably because they can actually take that risk. And there are venues where we don't need to be well known, even if the selection is strict. You all get a chance. Private investors don't know me yet, so they're not going to. Well, they will wait for me to get other types of funding, so that I have a proof that I am capable of doing this, and that's where I stand. I'm still in this period of time. Now, could you give us an idea of the budget? Not necessarily Entrée dans la danse, but this same type of project. What kind of budget do you have for that? And out of this budget, what is the global public aid share that you can count on? Well, I have no problem talking about figures. I think it's important to give you an idea. Entrée dans la danse is 400,000 euros, and that is quite conservative. The CNC gave us, well, the two female authors had 5,000 and 6,000 in the writing. No, I'm not supposed to be in this loop. It's not my budget. There were 50,000 euros for the development and 120,000 euros for the production. And the South region also helped in the development, 15,000 euros they gave. So those are quite nice figures. So 400,000 minus the amounts I just gave you, it's not everything. There still is money lacking. So we should have, well, the same type of amount. I can invest 20,000, 30,000 from my pocket, but no more. I don't have 100,000 euros once again. So that's more or less the budget for such projects. Now, for ambitious projects, audiovisual projects, you have this type of budget. It's a typical budget. If it can go higher, 400,000, 500,000, 700,000 euros. So the intervention of public authorities is limited to 50% of the budget by law. Now, that doesn't mean that you will get up to 50%. Because if you are dealing with a project that is worth 1 million euros, you cannot get half of that. So the public funding is accessible to the CNC. And you have also the regions in France. Many regions have specific financial support. You can get support from the Ministry of Culture, so many different things. Now, the idea for this specific digital work is that some forms have stayed quite simple and easy to control by an author or a small group of people, and other types of work require a bigger structure with more computer work involved, etc. So then public funds are required, but public funds are not enough. And then you have to find other solutions, especially for broadcasting. Broadcasting is a very complex industry, whatever the type of work art, contemporary or other. Now, what is the share of the contribution of private broadcasters today? And do you have any support from public authorities when it comes to broadcasting? The first part of the question was on broadcasting also? Yes. Okay. Well, I must say that we are at the very beginning of something, I think. There are more and more distributors, broadcasters. Well, you know, a few years ago, we worked with broadcasters, so media, audiovisual groups. I won't name them. Well, I will. France Télévisions, Arte, amongst others, because the private groups were less present on this type of work. And both Arte and France Télévisions were very important partners for many of the directors involved, with budgets that could fill the gap, the 50% gap, sometimes a bit more, a bit less. But in any case, they were very important partners. Without doing the broadcasting work exactly, Arte for a few years had for everything related to immersion, you know, they broadcast a lot on arte.tv and France Télévisions on SAC, etc., for a linear content. And then Arte had an app for several years that helped broadcast video contents. So it was quite logical for them to keep being partners of this type of project, even if other versions came up, other versions that were not the 360 version. So they had an app, they would broadcast their creations on YouTube. And today, France Télévisions is a publisher of some immersive experiences. This means that they are going to publish in app stores or game stores. They're going to edit content on the very often open source formats, so that doesn't make them earn money. And then you have other players who are less French, even not French at all. For instance, headset manufacturers, to talk about them in general terms. It can be in China, HTC in Taiwan, for instance, also. And they're going to co-produce some experiences with different strategies depending on the stores or depending on the headsets manufacturers. Sometimes the headsets are free in the stores, or they have to be bought. It depends on the strategy chosen. And then you have other types of players. With HTC, we work a lot with Weimars. It doesn't co-produce works. They order some content to put in the stores and not in the headsets. It's not for the people who bought the headsets. And they're going to work on the form of, well, sponsorship. They're going to order works that will be presented in different events, biennials, for instance. So that's for the artistic world. Or in museums. And they become partners at a more or less important level. It depends what the producer agrees to give them. But that helps with the broadcasting, because they have advertisement budgets, communication budgets, and those are things we need, of course. And then you have a few players, just a few, not too many, but in France you have 3 distributors, ISEA, Diversion, and Anthem Connection. And they are also partners in the world of distribution. Could you explain? Well, they will take part in the production and will give money called a minimum amount guaranteed. And this amount, whether the distributor gets it back or not, will stay and remain in production. In percentage, what does it account for? Was it 5%, for 50% of the production budget today? No, we're around 5%, 10% maybe. And it's not very widespread, because you have few projects today that have a real sale potential. So the more sales there are, the more the distributors can participate. Do you get any support from the public authorities on this type of project, for instance? Not really, not yet. No. It's clearly something. Well, there are a few grants. There's one financial support from French Immersion. It's a shared grant between Unifrance, CNC, and another partner. So they're small amounts, but sufficient to send a producer to a festival or to a market when an artwork is selected. So this type of assistance is quite helpful. And then there's something else that didn't last long. It wasn't a broadcasting financial support, but it was support that helped directors make their content available under other forms, and there were adaptations also under other formats. And this way you can reach another market, another audience, or a wider audience. So it's a sort of broadcasting support, but it was only one shot, unfortunately, and we're waiting for the CNC to provide a budget that can come back every year. But so far there haven't been much of this broadcasting support. But we do have European financial support. A distribution platform was created. It's not broadcasting support, but it's support to create a tool that can help distribution. That came from European help. Whether we are talking about a contemporary art installation or softwares broadcasted on platforms, whatever the nature, the grants are usually linked to broadcasting. Now, do you think that there should be a new balance? Do you think we should help less artworks, but really help them till the end, the broadcasting stage? Or do you think that the financial support should be more evenly distributed to be able to help more people? You, as a creator, producer, what can you tell the public authorities on how to help the whole industry better? There's an example with theater. There's a body that helps the content to be disseminated. Now, there's a very important point also. Remember that it's important to know how to fly with your own wings. As we were saying earlier, we're very lucky because we have a lot of support, and it's great to have the support. We'd love to have all this financial support, but let's not forget that we need to rally and make sure that we have a better understanding of these systems. Today, the situation is very complicated. It's complicated to have an artwork, and it's always the same problem. We need middlemen or people who are in charge of the users for this installation to be mobile. It's hard to have no one. During COVID, we needed someone, for instance, to wash the headsets. That's what a museum asks from us. How much is it going to cost? Over the period of time, and depending on the answer, they will decide on what time to open to make it feasible. Because you cannot have someone 24/7 to wash the headsets, for instance. It would be way too expensive. So it's not possible for museums. And that's the reason why most of the time things don't happen. If we need to add ombudsman and middlemen, it's impossible. Sarah, do you think more money is needed, better distributed? No, it's not possible. But I agree with the idea that we can make do and we can make our own decisions. But I don't agree to say that these venues can be rallied. It's hard for us to categorize what we produce. There are 82 members where I work. We have web series, augmented reality books, contemporary art installations. So stop believing in the myth of having a ready-made broadcasting budgets. It's too complicated. Now, what's important is to educate people. Maybe public institutions have a role to play to say that you should not be afraid that this can be managed. And it's true, museums buy installations, they buy mediation, they already do this. They should not be afraid of our budgets. Our budgets are calculated, they are well thought about. We don't come and say, oh, we'd like 50,000 euros, but we are going to use this for something you won't know how to use. No, we adapt to the situation, and public funding can help us. If you are a producer of this type of work, our work needs to focus on dissemination. And this, the format, the type of headsets, to go and disseminate, to make sure that the system is completely transparent and that the distributors can use that. But I would say that distributors are quite reluctant. I may be wrong, but I think there's something we should do here. We need to find a way to set their minds at ease, to reassure them. We are ready, and I think the audience is ready too. At the Rennes Opera, I remember a couple of days, it was 14 euros the entrance. People had never worn those headsets, and they thought it was great. 45 minutes of virtual reality. They loved it, and it works. So I think the investment was fruitful for the Opera House because it was well organized. So that's what we need to do. So they're not all reluctant. What do you think about this? I agree. I absolutely agree with Sarah. I think that, well, some institutions are reluctant, and those who give it a try are those who try once and go back to it, because they realize that the audience is asking for this and that it's not that complicated to organize. So when we explain, well, it's complicated to have a middleman, actually all these institutions already have a middleman that they have to pay to do many different things. So we're not going to hire a person to do only that, to only clean up headsets, for instance. But, you know, the audience is less and less unexperimented. The economic models also have changed. They're much simpler. And there will be more and more of this type of artwork, and the audience will maybe be able to clean their own headsets, and it will be better done. Yes, it's very simple. Everyone does this. It's true for the audio headsets. Yes, but you know, very often they don't want to leave wipes because some people may leave with the whole bag of wipes. But there are little tricks to implement to avoid this. Now, sometimes we have to manage really practical things, and we need to think on how a large and diverse audience can enter this experience. But some things can happen very simply. And when you have a motivated team, the solutions are found very easily. And with less motivation, it's less easy to find solutions, but that's life. Well, that's quite encouraging. We are reaching the conclusion of the roundtable, but we have a few minutes for a Q&A session if you have any questions. Yes, there's one question. There's a microphone coming. Good afternoon. I'd like to know how you think public spaces are going to develop. What part or what share will be dedicated to virtual reality? There might be more possibilities in digital art venues. I think that broadcasting is becoming more complicated. It's not always adapted to virtual reality. Is not always adapted to the venue. Well, you're talking about contemporary art here, and you have to know that people are quite reluctant to take on this subject. For instance, the Palais de Tokyo or places like that, they are a bit reluctant, even though there were many artworks that were produced. So when we talk to them about this, maybe they see it too close to the entertainment industry, the gaming industry, and I'm talking about France, not necessarily the other countries. In Lausanne, for instance, it's completely different. Or in Taiwan, we met many players, and things are different. So in French contemporary art, some environments of contemporary art, there are people who are still reluctant. Yes, absolutely. And then, it all depends on how they hear about the project. And this type of institution, they want to have their own programming. And we have a lack of knowledge on what already exists. So these venues don't always have the possibility to test, to see what exists in festivals and to organize their own programming compared to what already exists. So we're at the very beginning, but I'm quite hopeful. And I think that this is going to develop with venues that will be probably equipped and other venues that will see this more as an entertaining event. Thank you. Any other question? One last question.
For discussion, I'm also a multimedia producer, so I really relate a lot to what you were talking about. I was just thinking, what would be your opinion and your suggestion for the public funding? Would it be like approach to create an interdisciplinary category that all these type of projects can apply for as a separate, stream for public funding, or would it be better to simply raise a big question about how do we consider and what we understand with the classical formulations as a film, theater, etc., etc. So, what would be your opinion? Either to create interdisciplinary category for all of this, or to open up borders and raise a question and discuss and reconsider the classical terminology?
Je vais commencer par répondre peut-être en tout cas sur notre...
Well, regarding the CNC, we try to impose as little as possible, and it's actually our goal to group our supports in a new fund, the immersive creation. And the word immersive must be seen as very wide. Many of these artworks, and we had an example of this with the work that Sarah mentioned, are very multidisciplinary. So it would be difficult to know if Entrer dans la danse is more literary adaptation work, choreography, or immersion, because in reality, they're all art forms that don't need to be compartmentalized or be put in silos. We don't want to put projects into set boxes. We don't want these constraints on the artists. Now, that being said, even if I am all for freer projects, I think it is a problem for production and broadcasting, because it's like having one big financial support in which you have everything. So you end up producing projects. I can send a project, for instance, that will be very focused on contemporary art, and that will be compared, because this is what happens, with another project that is completely different. And I think it's good to have this diversity, but does it really enrich things? And doesn't it raise an issue having so many projects in one place? And by nature, you're comparing apples and oranges in the end. So I don't have the answer to that question. I don't know if it's a good thing or not for the industry at large.
Yes, I also agree with you. And we also see this in festivals. The VR festivals, be the VR artwork. It's because the microcosm is very small and everything is happening in the same place. Little by little, everything will find its place. But it reminds me of digital art. Yes, it's a very complete debate, because we have a lot of living shows broadcast in this virtual world with living shows where we never know where it is happening. We have made the choice of gathering these digital artworks in one place. I feel like your comments are very correct, but if you had said the opposite, you would have heard comments that were also correct in their own right. I don't want to make the artists go into a silo to say, oh, your work is going to be theater because it is mostly theater. Can I react to that? So this sends us back to the previous question. Do we need XR spaces in museums? No, because we don't have to, we should not categorize. This will come, we're not selling something that's coming from a VR headset. It's experimental. The object doesn't define the art. It's exactly the same problem that we had at the beginning of what we call digital art, and it's still a bit the case. In my opinion, it never made any sense. The idea of an art that is dominated by its medium. I think it's the other way around. XR is only a tool that would allow the creator. Well, you can develop a career with XR, but you could also do it only once and then do it again 10 years later or completely move on. It's a tool, and I think that's how it should be seen. Places dedicated purely to that might have made sense at a point, but I think it will be dispersed, just like all media is dispersed. And now, of course, immersive theater, that remains to be seen. It depends on the number of projects that will be proposed. I think we have to wrap up because the timing is against us, but we finish on a note of optimism and questioning, because it is an art that is constantly being built and rebuilt. And I hope that we will have a chance to talk about it again in a few years and see where we are. Thank you, Sarah, Chloé, and Stéfane, and thank you, everybody.